Hello and welcome to the DocArena Podcast in association with Film Ireland. My name is Ross Whitaker, and every fortnight I want to dig deeply into the motivations of documentary filmmakers. How do they choose their subject material, and what approaches and strategies do they employ to fund, craft and distribute their work? In this episode, I'm delighted to speak to Kristina Lindström and Kristian Petri about their feature doc, The Most Beautiful Boy in the World, which premiered at Sundance and is coming to cinemas in the UK and Ireland from July 30th. On the 50th anniversary of the glittering premiere of Death in Venice, this documentary tells the moving story of the young boy who embodied legendary character Tadzio in Visconti's masterpiece. That young boy was Björn Andrésen, and his life was changed forever when Visconti plucked him from obscurity, labelled him the most beautiful boy in the world, and placed him in the limelight. Today, 50 years later, Björn Andrésen still lives in the shadow of his 15-year-old self. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I was just wondering to start off with, if you wouldn't mind explaining for people who haven't seen it yet, what the film is about.
Film is about obsession with beauty and about desire and about sacrifice. It's about a boy who played the role in Luchino Visconti's Death in Venice in 50 years ago. And it's about who was that boy and what happened to him. And it's more.
It's very much about the story is not about Tadzio, the character in Death in Venice. It's a film about Björn Andrésen, who plays that role, and how the film came to change his life in many ways.
Define him.
In Luchino Visconti declared him in the London premiere 50 years ago, world premiere in London. He declared him to be the most beautiful boy in the world. And that was sort of stuck with him. It became like a sort of persona. He couldn't get rid of it, and it created a lot of, it changed his life. And we thought that was an extremely interesting subject for a film, how a film can change a person's life, not only,
And as he was a child and he was going into adolescence and he was in a formative part of his life, and that's what made the whole impact of this journey, and you for him more strong.
No, you can say that it's a very long time ago. It's 50 years ago, but they still have these, if you might call them fan pages. I don't know what, maybe that's not the right word, but the pages where you celebrate the beauty of this young boy. Thousands and thousands on internet. It's amazing. It never stops. So it's still there.
And he's a subject for other people's projections. That he's taken his face is stolen and made something else out of.
It was interesting watching it in that when you see that London premiere, the scale of it, it feels, that obviously a film release of this size back then was a much bigger deal probably than it would be now. So when you think of the story in modern terms, you don't realize the impact that it would have had on him. I mean, the Queen and Princess Anne were at the premiere in London. And the footage of it's I don't know if there's any kind of modern comparison to just the level of exposure that this young boy suddenly had. And in your film, we then find out about how his life was before that and the kind of person that he was and why this would have such a big impact on him. And that's kind of the discovery of the film.
Yes, it is. And it's obvious that he was chosen not only for his beauty by Visconti, but for the story of his life. I mean, the experience he had in his young life, he had that in his eyes, I think, for Visconti that made him even more attractive for Visconti, with the sadness and the darkness.
That's what everyone says around which you are still alive, that he had this very special charisma, not only of beauty, but he had a darker side as well, of sadness and of vulnerability. And that's what's made him so exciting and interesting for a filmmaker. You know, you see that it's not only a pretty face, but it's a soul. It's something, you know, which is, of course, Visconti saw immediately, and that he differed from the other boys.
And he had this dark soul, but also a very rich soul with a lot of humor. Even
Yeah,
as a teenager, he was
yeah,
all his teenage friends and people that met him, and even for us,
no,
he has a lot of humor.
yeah,
In different ways,
and
very
he
witty.
and he was very charismatic, as you can see already in the casting. I mean, still now, 50 years later, we understand. You know, he has something special, something extra.
So how did you then come to make this film? As you say, it's a story from now over 50 years ago. How did you decide to make this film now? Was it the 50th anniversary that struck you, or was it more that it was something in the back of your mind?
No, it was like for us in our generation, we're a bit younger, but everyone you know about Björn Andrésen. You know about the most beautiful boy in the world. He was even a cutout doll in the magazines you read, and he was in the papers. And his story was, I mean, like stories that always are there. You don't sometimes you don't see them or think of them, but
Right in front of
yeah.
you.
So, but you worked with him as in a feature film.
Yeah, I actually met him some more than 20 years ago, and we worked on a. I'm also making fiction films and TV series, and I worked on a TV series for children, and he was the bad guy, the one that scared all the children, and he loved it. No, he was a sweet person, and we had a lot of fun on the shoot. But I didn't, you know, I'm thinking, should I talk about Death in Venice? And no, he seemed very reluctant. There was something he
It
wanted
wasn't
to talk
something that
about.
he wanted to talk about. I mean, it
And
was obvious.
I respected that. So
But when once when I joined you, I just started to ask things about how he ended up in the film, and about he was talking about started to talk about this with living with his grandmother, and well, what happened to your mother and your father, and what. So we started to talk about the backstory of his life, and then it was a process. We asked him if we could do this film, and it was a process. He was reluctant because he usually used to say I call it the film that destroyed my life, and it's so it was nothing. He didn't want to be defined by that continuously, but we talked about how could we do it if we
yeah,
do it.
so it took like half a year before he said yes, and then we were shooting the film for 5 years. So we had the luxury of waiting, sort of, you know, for the right moment to, you know, when he would open
when he
up, and he was so we
when he wanted to
when he
and what
wanted
it.
to, and we did. So we tried really hard not to put any pressure on him, you know. But he knew what we wanted, you know. So and he was really part of the process. And but when he was ready, he sort of invited us, you know, as let the right one in. But so then
Yeah.
he took us into the room, and then we
No,
could.
when you're doing a film about me, I mean, that was like 2 years after starting filming. I think you should meet my daughter, and that kind of
Yeah.
yeah the door. He opened the door of two different rooms and decided when it was suitable for him.
And so, how was that process for you then? Were you happy to be patient about it, or was it a stage after 2 years where you were thinking, "Oh, we're not making much progress here"? You seemed like you were very relaxed about it.
I think it was. We found that it was necessary. It was not. much. Of course, it was a choice, but we were happy about it. Of course, something. It took 1 year before we could come into his apartment. That was a bit frustrating, shooting a documentary and
And
let's go to your place. No.
no, because I never let no one in there. But I mean, it was also because the only places where his living room was some bars in his neighborhood, and it is really hard to film. I mean, to do only interviews in bars. It's rather loud and noisy, and it's strange. Well, but I think it was necessary, and we knew that. But along the way, we also discovered and found and got all this archive material in different ways. So it was, I mean, we was fully up with
Yeah.
doing that.
And it was actually like after, I think, 3 years or something, that we found out about the 50-year anniversary. Oh my God! In 2 years' time, it's 50 years since this film. So it was just like, wow, okay, that's good. I mean,
We had talked about that.
yeah,
It wasn't.
But it wasn't sort of like.
It was not an issue that we.
No, and also we thought that we will be ready before that, and then COVID came, and everything slowed down, and so all of a sudden here we are. It's 50 years, so
It happens to be.
yeah, so it's amazing with this London premiere, 50 years after. It's because it really was in London. It started.
Yeah, you can see that in the film. What a huge deal that was, and I expect for him when he went from, maybe the fun of the casting, or elements of intrigue, and everything was new, and then suddenly you're thrown into the limelight. I think that probably was a big moment for him, and you really see that in the archive. And the archive is one of the most amazing things about this film, and the many sources that you have, but the quality of it, and that I'm not surprised it took you so long to make the film when I think of how much archive you had to accumulate. Was that something that Bjorn helped with in terms of his family archive? Because there was quite a lot of that.
Yeah, and he did, and his sister did, and his daughter when we met her, and then then it was, how it is. People think, do you have some films? And yeah, maybe, and then when people start to look,
Yeah.
they find like these sound tapes, a lot of hours and hours of sound tapes with recording. I mean, his aunt that recorded, nearly every telephone call to them.
And there was also a secret recording
Yeah.
from his mother put on vinyl and said secret, and nobody had ever listened to it. So to be listened to after my death, on vinyl. And
Yeah.
then but that was his mother reading poems
Yeah.
to, for the future.
Yeah.
So there is a special family, really. And we also had the researchers in Japan and in Italy and England.
Together with us,
together.
we knew the persons that he had met, and we knew about this manga impact, and which stories that he was a model for. But we had a lot of research help to find them and get them to participate and to meet Björn, because the idea for us was not doing a film like with people talking about Björn. So he was always with us when we were doing things. The only exception was because that it was. He said, "I want you to meet my daughter, and I want you to meet her alone first, so that she can say whatever she wants." That was so that was the way we worked. And to come back to the Japan story, yes, it was amazing to find everyone that he had met and worked with when he was 15 years old, and they were there.
It was, as Kristina says here, it was very much part of the aesthetics of the film also, not to make a film with the talking heads and experts talking about him and Visconti and
That was also something that he liked when we talked about the film, that we wanted to do a cinematic film, a film with a production value, and we wanted to make it like this widescreen and comparable to the format of Death in Venice, and we wanted to do a cinematic film with Björn,
yeah.
and he liked
No,
that.
it was so weird. We were thinking about this cinema. And then it sort of, and so far it has mostly been shown in, or only been shown in online festivals. And so actually London is the first time where you can really, an audience can go and watch it in cinema. It's the first time.
And that's because...
So that's amazing. And the only sad thing is that we cannot be there. Because of the
Quarantine, yeah. And when you were making those decisions about how to make the film and keeping Bjorn in it, what were the conversations, I suppose, that you were having together to kind of figure that out and to figure out what those elements would be to make the film?
We were talking about places, his places that related to his path in his life, and that we wanted to make them visual, like in Japan and in Venice and in Stockholm as well. So we were filming a lot, just miljö, vad heter det? Miljö.
Yeah, places.
Yeah.
But also persons, of course, and we had like chapters.
In the first editing.
In the first editing, we had like chapters, like in a book, like in a novel. But then that came out, but you can still see traces of it. You know, like one chapter is the mother, another chapter is the boy, one chapter is the film, etc. And when we were editing, and then also when we were thinking about it, and one huge chapter actually disappeared just before we were finished, and that was the sort of last creative
it was
decision
like
we made.
20-25 minutes.
Yeah, and that was
cut
called
out.
The Father.
It was cut out.
And that was all about his father, his missing, unknown father.
So it was like were walking into a room, a house with his life, and went through different doors. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and
different doors
in a way, the introduction is a little bit a glimpse of that, or a sort of visual introduction of that idea. When we came, because that's Hotel de Bain, the ruin of Hotel de Bain, the main setting for the Visconti film. And when Björn saw it, because it's in a state, as you see now, of decay, and he looked at this. We came in there and said, "Wow, this is fantastic! It's
the walls like
this house is like me." He said. He's a very funny person.
I understand why you choose this.
Yeah, it looks like me.
And the it's very interesting that you talk about the chaptering of the film, because it was something that I really noticed, was that you weren't following any specific chronology. It felt, not that it was very noticeable, but it's just something that kind of dawned on me as I went through, is like we're not actually kind of, you know, taking it from, you know, the beginning to the end. It's really, we're able to diverge off and to find what feels like the next important thing to talk about, and I can see how that was part of a chaptering process. How it's a fascinating film in terms of the edit, because it does that so well, and because you have all these different materials in terms of audio recordings, archive of different types, and then this kind of contemporary path that you're walking with him. How was the edit? It feels like it would have been a tricky one to just get that balance right.
Yeah.
It was a little tricky, but it was also, we sort of actually edited every sort of, if you call them chapter. We had the mother chapter for sort of itself, and then the sort of the film for itself, and then we started sort of blending them together. And we had one version, which I think still is Björn's favorite, which was 2.5 hours long. It was really great, but it's maybe not, the dream for a distributor or a producer. So,
No.
but it was a bit long. And this one is better actually. So, but it's
there's a lot of course, darlings cut out
Yeah.
because it's so rich, the material. So we had really to. Sometimes we just, even today, nearly every day there is something we say, shit.
or we quote something from a scene that's no longer there, which is weird. But it's
that's what happens when you sit in an editing room and you hear these lines over and over. And they get into your body and they become quotes of this period of our life in editing and doing
we
this
we
film.
often quote with sort of we've been doing this for too long. It's time to change movie now.
Yep.
But it's I was going to say something about it was important. I think we both felt that if when you're leaving this film, you are in, you still can feel some hunger, or I want more, instead of feeling I'm full. Thank you, no, but that feeling, when you had enough, and the last half hour has been, it's like this endless dessert.
And we also had very early. We had the cinematographer Erik Wallsten and Anna von Hauswolf as a composer. So they were really a part of the making of the film as well.
And in taking it from the 2.5 hours down to the 90 minutes, what was that process? Was that kind of showing it to people, doing a little bit more editing? I'm always interested in how people make those final decisions.
Yeah, it was. We tried it because we liked it so much. This part, and we tried to cut down the film, and so we lost a lot of things, and it got messier instead. And we also felt that it was, every single part was very, very good, but in it was exhausting to see.
It was too much. You
much,
sort
too long.
of lost focus, and so it was better to take out one big piece than to sort of take.
We made that decision that, and we made it with another editor that was in. Because
actually,
and we said to him, "This is your main. This is your main goal. You have to take out the father."
it's just funny that, because that editor, he's the same editor that did Let the Right One In.
Can I ask you then with Bjorn, because it's such a personal film, and it took you some time to really, I suppose, break down the barriers and create the intimacy that you needed, but it is so intimate. I mean, it's surprisingly intimate, and obviously we don't see the journey that you took to get to that point. We just arrive at the moment in his apartment where you have that kind of level of access to a man who's very vulnerable. Did he watch the film then? I suspect by then he knew what it, he understood what it was becoming, but it must have been difficult for him to watch all the same.
I think I understand how you can imagine how it was, but it was not like that, because when Björn decided to be in the film, he just he's totally cool. He has no problems with, oh, don't film that, don't do that, because like he he's like the camera is not there for him. He's so
He's extremely casual
yeah.
about the camera. It's no, it's not a big deal for many. Some people there, it's a big deal. Oh, it's a film team in my home. Jesus, you know, it doesn't bother him at all. He can just, you know, sit there, smoke and listen or do something, and forget about us, you know. And we were
So
just there, so it's a lot of that material which obviously we can't.
yeah, and also it's a lot of material that we have decided for ourselves that we have not cut into the film. So I mean, so there's a lot of things that are
So
not there because we have chosen to not have it there.
But also, I think that when you have the luxury of both waiting and just being spend time with him, things will happen like that telephone call. There was
Yeah.
obviously not directed or orchestrated or anything. It just happened, and so that's
Things happen
yeah, and that's the beauty of documentary filmmaking. I think
if you have time.
these moments
Yeah.
that you just appear from out of nowhere.
But Björn has seen the film in different. I mean, different.
All the different shapes. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
Yes.
how many times, but
Yeah.
many times.
And he likes to watch it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel for a lot of people, maybe it's because he's in the film industry that he's able to kind of watch it and understand and so on. But it's kind of amazing to me that he would watch it several times. Do you think it's kind of part of a cathartic experience for him, or that the film is doing something to help him?
I think it's very hard to speculate on what he is feeling, but obviously he's a very smart person and he's a creative person, and I think he sees it both. Obviously, he's in there. He's the main attraction of the main character, or how you. But he's also interested in film and the way it's sort of like how we
How you
made
do
it,
it,
how we
yeah.
do it, and how we made it, and what kind of choices we made, and everything of this interests him.
And I think it's to answer the question. I think it's. I mean, it's better. It's for Björn to
Yeah,
tell.
he.
But his daughter said to me that it had meant so much for them because they have during this process they have now can talk about things they never talked about before.
Yeah, it helps to tell your story, I suppose, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about how you were able to fund the film? Because, as you said, it took you a little while to gain access. At what stage were you able to convince funders to be on board? It seems like you have a really good combination of people that have kind of contributed to the film. What was the process like?
It went very fast, actually. We had a producer who believed in this from day one, and she said, "This is a project I've been, waiting for someone to come in, and I was dreaming about this project." So she was very happy and very passionate about this. The whole process still are so, and still is. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's and she believed in this, and she's responsible for the. So it didn't take too long time.
No,
actually.
it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, for for I don't know the English expression, sjösätta, to launch it. It was. I mean, to start filming, and to have resources for that. It was not.
Right.
It was not a problem. But then, of course, while we were, it was like over the years, and the
Yeah,
editing time is
We're in the middle of the fourth year.
yeah.
Fourth year still shooting. Aren't you? Yeah, aren't you
Yeah.
happy? So,
and yeah.
So of course we had these discussions, and editing time. Also, oh my God, I mean.
And
We-
also
But
this,
she was very supportive.
yeah. But I
very-
think it has also the pandemic has added a lot of costs to the process.
Yeah.
When you because we had co-production and we said Danish sound designers, and I mean it was
Yeah.
different.
And also when to release the film. I mean, it
Yeah.
has. We had 1.5 year now or more of COVID, so we've been sort of waiting for the right moment to release it. And I don't know if that is the right moment. Sundance felt like a good place to start.
It was great.
Yeah, it was great. Sundance was great, and still is, so because it's in London now.
It took, as you said, a number of years to make it, but I increasingly feel that the more time you can spend with a film, often the better it ends up being. I mean, would you subscribe to that you needed that long to make the film as good as it is?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it would have been
Yeah.
impossible not having this time in this special case. I mean, of course, there are other projects where you can be faster, and it's not necessary. But this particular film, yes, I
Yeah.
would say the time was an extremely important
Yeah, and
factor.
as the way we wanted to do it, we had to wait for Japan, and we had to wait for finding the right moments and possibilities to meet people. And some people that Björn wanted us to meet, it took some time to find.
And some
So
died during the
yeah, so they
yeah.
were not.
So
Was there any areas of Bjorn's life that you wanted for him to talk more about, but he wasn't willing to, or he seems very open in throughout the film?
Yeah, of course, there is a lot of things that we have talked about also that we have decided that this is not for. I mean, he has. I think we haven't had this dialogue during the filming very much, so we haven't had that kind of things when he see the film and says, "Cut that out, cut that out. I don't want it to be." It's more like we had this. Vad heter det? Trustful, trusting relationship during the filming. There was two persons in Paris that that we had booked that we would go to make interviews with. One of them died suddenly, and another one cancelled the interview. So when we landed in Paris and put on the mobile, it's cancelled. So it was a bit.
then there was an American actor,
Yeah, it was
which we really
Carrie
wanted.
Fisher.
Carrie Fisher. They were friends.
So that was something that Björn really wanted
Yeah.
us to.
And all of a sudden she died, just like that. When we were about in the middle of the shooting, so those things happens also. So but I mean, have been very, very lucky also. So I can't complain. But there are, of course,
Yeah.
that would have been interesting.
Was was there anything from this film that was a big lesson for you that you would take forward into other films that you might make?
It's so special. I think every film it has its own special. Yeah, it's a good question.
I think at least we have put very much. I mean, things we have this experience before since other films, and now we put them together. And this film was extraordinary in the way with Björn, with his the way of working together with him, and with all this archive materials, which is both personal and from Rai, and from this we see the moments in his life happen before our eyes. So I think we put together very much experiences together in this film.
Thinking also that to be courageous, I think we actually have been that, and we have tried a lot of things. Although it's not, some of it is in the film, and some it didn't work, but we still try them instead of thinking, "Oh my God, how would that be?" So if we had an idea which is this might work, we shot it instead of just talking about it, or we edit it. So and that's also adds to the time, of course. But we did that, and I really liked that.
Yes, and the combination of that, the photographer was, it was not only like a lot of documentaries are talking heads or talking. It's scenes, it's like being
Yeah,
a fly in wall, but this, we really wanted it to be visual. So we had this,
I
that's
think,
special with this film for us, I think.
and I think also many people, myself included, doing documentaries have an idea, and then they sort of want to illustrate that idea as they go along, instead of hey, wait a minute, what is the reality here? What is happening? What is really happening? And it's changing. It's in front of your eyes, and it's maybe not as exactly as you thought it would be. And then okay, so go for that instead. And I think that was a lot of with Björn. Like things were changing, and new paths, new rooms, new stories, and
Yeah, after a
same.
summer vacation, he said, for example, just I want you to meet my girlfriend, Jessica.
Yeah.
She was totally new.
Yeah.
So all in a sudden she was there. And I mean, it would have been possible that she didn't want to participate at all, or so.
But she was there and all of a sudden started cleaning the apartment. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a new
Yeah.
path in
Yeah.
this movie.
It's one of the big aspects of it, and I wonder if this was part of your conversation with your cinematographer too, is the juxtaposition between the face that you see then and the face that you see now, but at the same time you photograph him with such respect and affection now. You know what I mean? It's not as if you hide from that. So like that was to me a really kind of a juxtaposition that at the beginning is almost, I suppose, a little bit shocking to see how far he's fallen. But by the end of it, you actually have so much respect for him that you're looking at his face in another way again. And I wonder,
That's very nice.
I'm so
Nice
glad to
approach.
hear you say that, because
That's the sort of something
Yeah.
you really want the audience to have that feeling as you describe it now.
It
I
was,
think that's
I'm very,
great.
very glad, because that was our intention, because he has such a dignity and a beauty in another way. To see him as to be a person, not an image.
yeah, because if you see that man walking on the beach, you think, he's so thin, and he looks like his life has been very difficult, and you know nothing about him. You don't have the respect that you would have for him when you understand his entire story put together. And I think that's what you've done, is you've put together the jigsaw of his life in a way that makes you really feel great empathy for him. But I also thought the visual side of that was really well done. The cinematographer did a wonderful job of capturing that. And I mean, was that, and you used kind of a lot of nice gimbal shots and so on, so it had that cinematic feel despite it being in the modern moment and in a documentary. And I just wondered, a little bit more about that, kind of what conversations you had with the cinematographer to make sure that you got that kind of feeling.
Oh, we had it. I remember we had a starting meeting, drinking hot chocolate and cinnamon buns with him. He's a very talented young cinematographer, and he was very, intrigued to do this. So we had a constant dialogue, and we had this Alexa, the camera. He had, yeah.
And also, he's a Steadicam operator as well. So the Steadicam shots in the film are he operated himself. So it's a very technically also advanced but we were looking at photographs of old classic documentary, portraying it's not so known in England, but Sune Jonsson, and we were looking at the classic Swedish photography, capturing people. and so he's very very well sort of still photo history. He's a legend, you know. It's also very much about say my bad hit. Dignity, you know, portraying people or had a rough lives, you know, Swedish peasants living in the north of Sweden, you know, how they, you know, he portrays them in their
This still photographer that we
yeah
were inspired of.
yeah.
It's kind of these kind of powerful portraits, isn't it, of him, you know, and allowing that just to happen visually, as you said, as opposed to just be interviews all the time.
Yeah.
But it's also important, and we talked a lot about that we should also be able to go back and have a lot of wide shots, not to be sort of like too TV, sort of like documentary look, but sort of get that film look to go back.
And obviously, because we decided about the widescreen, so we had to fill it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not working so well in a computer format.
It was a pleasure talking to both of you. I really love the film. I think it's a really, really beautiful portrait of him, and I hope that it does really well for you. So thank you, and best of luck.
Thank you. All the best.
Many thanks again to Kristina and Kristian for taking part in the interview. The Most Beautiful Boy in the World is playing in cinemas in the UK and Ireland from July 30th. Thanks to Stephen Galvin and Film Ireland for supporting the podcast, and to film composer Michael Fleming for kindly allowing me to steal his music. You can find more of it at michaelflemingmusic.com. And thanks to you for listening.